I'm going to be talking about 10 reasons why you may not want to move to Deerfield Beach, Florida. Now, don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful place. There's a lot of great things to do and a lot of wonderful people down here, okay? But like many places, it's not for everyone. And folks, you know, honestly, even though we love living in paradise,
and we do,
okay, there are some downsides that we, that basically, as local realtors, we feel obligated to let you guys know about. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and start with number one.
Actually, you know what? And before we jump into that, okay, I want to be complete transparency here, and I want to be fair to everybody, okay? So, I mean, you've probably seen a lot of other videos that kind of do the same thing. I mean, everybody's doing videos these days. I mean, there's probably more YouTube videos on right now than there ever were, movies of the week when I was growing up. And we only had 3 channels.
Now you're showing your age.
I know, that's just, okay. And they talk about stuff like the weather, and they talk about the wildlife, and they talk about traffic, and, all those kind of things. And those are all valid, okay? But we want to kind of give you some insight into some of the things that you may not be aware of.
Yeah,
and some
we
of
wanted to try a different approach. A little something different.
A little something different, maybe just a little bit more detail, maybe you haven't really considered. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, huh, Suze?
Okay, well, the first one we thought of was reason number 1, flood and wind.
Okay, folks, so basically, hey, we are in South Florida, we're on the Atlantic, and we're on the intercoastal, okay? We do get heavy winds during the storm season, but one of the things that we actually get, and a lot of folks aren't really aware of this, and we have, in all fairness, we've mentioned it a few times ourselves, okay, but we do get a fair amount of flooding, okay? Now, everybody knows that just generically, the weather down here in South Florida, and Deerfield Beach is no exception where we are, okay, is that if you don't like the weather, wait 10 minutes, it'll change. So basically what that means is, every afternoon, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, April, May, June, November, December, January, you have a better than even probability of a rainstorm coming down.
So a tip, pack an umbrella, put it in your car.
Exactly, okay. And we actually think that those rainstorms are somebody else's way, okay, of making sure that for at least 5 minutes, it washes the humidity out of the air. Okay?
That's true.
But I mean,
it does cool down.
It does, but I mean, it's a deluge coming down. And what happens is that in some areas, especially if you're a tidal area, which is like the intercoastal, obviously the ocean is a good example, where you have tides that actually raise and lower depending upon the time of day, you may be subject to flooding, okay? Flood insurance, it's a whole different issue, a whole big different thing. If you are thinking about moving to Deerfield Beach or even anywhere in the Fort Lauderdale area, okay, and you want to talk about flood insurance, I can talk your ear off, okay?
So and he can.
So definitely give me a call. In fact, Suzanne only has one ear about it. So give us a call, okay? Shoot us a text, DM us, or click the Zoom link down below and set up a calendar thing, because that is an important consideration. But let's talk about kind of why you need flood insurance.
So, okay, go ahead and explain. Okay. Why would you need flood insurance?
Down here we have, in addition to the high tides and the low tides that come basically everywhere, even on large inland bodies of water, okay, we have what is known as king tide. Okay, what the king tide is that happens about 4 or 5 times a year, sometimes a little more frequently, but what it really is that what it means is that when the moon is at its apogee, which is the closest point to the earth, okay, the gravitational pull of the moon actually makes the tides rise even higher. So whereas maybe if your high tide is 4 feet, the king tide may kick it up to 7 or 8 feet, okay, which to most of us wouldn't sound like a big deal, especially if you're in a condo where you're in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th floor, okay, but if you're in a single family home and your elevation is only about 6 or 7 feet because you're on the water, okay, and all of a sudden the water level rises up another 4, 5, or 6 feet, you could find yourself in 18 to 24 inches of water for about a 24-hour period.
So let me ask you a question. Does everybody need flood insurance?
No, actually no. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you take a look at where you're at. You want to take a look at, whether you're in a condo. Obviously, if you're in a condo in the 5th floor, you really don't need flood insurance, okay? And if you do need flood insurance being in the 5th floor in a condo, you really need to get the hell out of Dodge. Because that means water is way, way, way too high.
Okay.
Very poor joke, obviously, but it was a joke nonetheless, okay? But no, what you really want to be looking at is you want to look at the elevation, okay? And FEMA has done a great job of being able to provide information via their website on flood zones, on basically the frequency at which certain areas can flood, may flood, have flood, will flood, whatever else. But insurance, the big thing about that is insurance companies also use that too. So in some cases, flood insurance is mandatory. In other cases, flood insurance is optional, but if you go back and do a little bit of research, or if you work with experts like me, like my team and I, then basically we'll do all this stuff for you to kind of make sure you're on the right track, is that we'll kind of give you an idea as to what the probability or the propensity of flooding would be in this particular area. Okay. Again, the biggest thing is that, you know, if this is something that concerns you, and a lot of folks there are, I mean, there's folks that have grown up on the banks of like the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, the Baltimore River, you know, up there, where they've seen flooding, okay, and they don't like it, and they're not interested in going anywhere where there's even a remote possibility of flooding. Folks, if that's the case, Deerfield Beach, Fort Lauderdale area, and possibly most of South Florida probably isn't the best thing for you unless you want to live a little further away or you want to live a little higher up in a condo.
Okay, so Kevin, what do you think reason number 2 is?
Okay, well, I guess I'm going to steal something from one of South Florida's favorite sons, Jimmy Buffett. Okay,
And one of ours too.
And one of ours too. So, but anyhow, we'll call it changes in latitude causes changes in attitude. Okay. Now we're from Northeast Georgia, so we're from the South. Okay, and I think folks, as you come into the South, whether it's in Georgia or Florida, South Carolina, wherever, and even if you come as far south as Deerfield Beach and Fort Lauderdale, there's an expectation of a certain amount of Southern hospitality. Okay, so folks, let me start off by managing that expectation. It doesn't exist here, okay? And the reason for that's real simple. South Florida, Deerfield Beach, Pompano Beach, all the areas around here, Fort Lauderdale, going down to Miami, going as far north as West Palm Beach, okay? We may be south from a geographical perspective. We may even be south from a latitude perspective. But folks, you're not in the South from an attitude perspective. This is not the laid-back, friendly South that you get into when you go out to some of the places, like if you go to outside of Atlanta, or if you go to some of the places like Starkville, Mississippi. There you go, Jill. Okay, or if you're going to Birmingham or Tuscaloosa, if you're going to Auburn, Alabama. There you go, Al, my friend Jonathan. Essentially, what it is that it's not the same. Okay, now there are areas of Florida in the north that are more similar in attitude and similar in personality as our northern neighbors of Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia. But this is not the deep South, and it's not laid back in any way, shape, or form. So you're going to get a little more activity, a little more action going on here.
Well, that's true, but don't you also think it's because there are so many people that we've met that are not originally from South
Florida?
I mean, 100%.
Definitely. I mean, you know, Suzanne was one of the few people that I'd ever met that was actually from Georgia, where we lived in Georgia.
Well, we're from the Atlanta suburbs, so yeah.
But it's even more rare finding folks that are actually from Deerfield Beach, Pompano Beach, the Fort Lauderdale area down here. So I think that's a part of it. The other part of it probably has to do with something we'll discuss in more detail later on in the video. But a lot of it has to do with the fact that this area, for about 4 or 5 months out of the year, is a very transient area. So we have a lot of folks that come down from the north, as far north as Toronto, as far north as Quebec and Montreal, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut. I mean, you know, from Massachusetts, you know, Paul and Cardisha, hey, this one's for you guys. We appreciate y'all coming down and visiting us. But you have a big mix of folks coming in, and then you also have a huge influx of folks coming in from Latin America, from South America, Central America, and we certainly don't want to leave off our European friends and neighbors coming in from Europe. So you get a nice melting pot in there, okay? And honestly, that blend of all these different cultures and attitudes and demeanors and behaviors.
It's not only that, but it's when you go to the restaurants and you have a long time to wait and you put your name on a list.
That's absolutely true. I mean, it's not the same laid back, you know, friendly, hey, you know, y'all here to have a good time, type of a thing. And I do a really poor Southern accent. I'm sorry, folks.
Yeah.
Okay, but essentially, if you're expecting Southern hospitality, let's manage that expectation, okay? And very, very, very rarely are you going to find it. You may find it in a restaurant that's frequented by locals, but it's going to be more of a local attitude and local mentality, which is very, very friendly to a lot of folks, especially if you're a fellow local.
Contractors, trying to find good contractors. And
Okay.
what do we mean by that, Kev?
Well, honey, basically finding a contractor or somebody who thinks that they're a contractor and a good contractor, that's not a problem. Okay, finding a contractor who actually is a good contractor, okay, and by that we mean that goes through everything that needs to be done, and we refer to this as LBI, licensed, bonded, and insured. Basically, from the standpoint of, before we go any further into this, okay, if you talk to somebody about doing work on your property, okay, and they're not licensed, bonded, and insured, okay, run far, run fast, or tell them to get the hell out. It's just that simple. I can't make it any other way. We've been through this so many times with so many folks that we've worked with, but essentially what you want to do is you want to make sure, and the reason for this is actually pretty simple.
Well, it is to cover you.
Well, it is, but there's an even simpler reason for it, okay? Chances are, if there's something that you want to have done down here, if you're contemplating doing anything that is of any significance to your single-family home, your condo, your townhome, your villa. I mean, hell, even your dock for that part in certain parts of the area. Okay, then chances are you're going to have a permit. Okay, and some of those requirements for permitting, okay, are pretty stiff, and they're pretty significant. So you need to make sure that you have somebody who understands what the building inspectors and the permit people are asking about. That's going to be somebody who is a licensed contractor. They have to go through, much like we had to go through a licensing process to get our real estate license. Okay, contractors have to go through a process to get their license, so that way they understand what they're talking about. Now I'm not talking about throwing a coat of paint on your house or anything like that. But if you're in a condo, for example, and you're above the first floor, second floor and up, okay, if you want to change your flooring, you probably need to go get a permit. If you want to swap out your hot water heater, you need a permit. If you want to put in new windows, you need a permit. If you're in a single family home and you want to change your windows out, not only will you need a permit, but chances are if they're not impact windows, you're going to have to replace them with impact windows. Thank you, Pompano. Thank you, Deerfield. Thank you, Coral Springs. Thank you, Coconut Creek. Thank you, Margate. And thank you, Tamarack. And the list goes on and on and on. You kind of get where I'm going.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, to a lot of people, especially where we came from in northeast Georgia, okay, basically I could have taken down my house with a block of C4 and built it back up again, and nobody would have cared.
No,
okay?
he's kidding.
But basically, what I really mean down here is that here's what happens, okay? And honestly, and folks, I'm telling you, this has happened. We've seen this. So somebody goes out and says, you know what, I want to redo my bathroom, and the bathroom looks great. We saw a beautiful condo that was done in one of the Century Villages up here in Deerfield Beach. Okay, that's why we're using Deerfield Beach as an example. Okay, they did a fantastic job on completely redoing the bathroom, and I mean, it looked like something out of the ancient Roman baths. It was terrific, and the price that they were asking for that property reflected all that stuff being done. So when I went back and did what we normally do and go out and do a permit check on it, there was no permit that was ever done on this. No permit was ever pulled. No permit was ever done. So all the work was done. It was unpermitted. Okay, so from our perspective as buyer's agents, that work now doesn't exist because it's basically illegal work. It's like almost like an ill-gotten gain, if you will. Okay, because especially in an over 55 community like Century Village, you're going to have that work being done. Not only was a permit not issued, but apparently it was not done in conjunction with the association, which is also a whole different set of rules and regulations. But they will defer to the localities in Deerfield Beach and others for the permit piece of it. Okay, so now the worst case scenario, at least we were able to actually work around that. And we actually found something else for our client. But I've been involved in discussions with other realtors where they have had buyers that have bought property, and somebody's come back around to come out and take a look at it, and the building inspector has said, hey, this is not the way it was when this was built. I don't see any permits on it. Now, the problem that arises with that, okay, is that basically now that you own the property, you could be responsible for having to get what they call a permit after the fact. Now, you've got to file the fees, file for a permit, okay, and there's a penalty for it, okay, and there's all kinds of fees that go along with that, okay, because basically Deerfield Beach, Broward County, they all want their fair share. But the biggest thing is that if this becomes an issue, this may actually adversely impact your ability to transfer title if you wanted to sell it.
Yeah,
So-
we don't want that to happen.
No, we don't want that to happen. We don't want that to
Right.
happen to everybody. But anybody, basically, it all really comes back to contractors. Now, if you're going to do it yourself, that's a whole different story. If you're willing to take on that liability and that extensive exposure yourself, you know what? My advice to you is to go figure out what the county says or what the city says, what Deerfield Beach has to say in this particular case. Okay, and if they say it's okay to go ahead and do it, go ahead and do it. But we as realtors, we go by what the rules and regulations say, and if a permit needs to be pulled, a permit should be pulled. And one of the criteria for choosing a contractor in this area is to go back and say, hey, are you familiar with doing work in Deerfield Beach? Have you done pulled permits in Deerfield Beach? Are you used to dealing with the city of Deerfield Beach and the building inspectors that come out and look at it? Because that permit could be anything from electrical to mechanical to plumbing. Okay, it could include fire. It could be a number of different things that are impacted that you, as an owner, okay, may not even be aware of. So again, folks, if you're not sure, ask us. We have a list of contractors that we work with. The upshot of this is basically you need to make sure that you check out the contract. You need to make sure that the contractors are licensed, bonded, and insured. They know how to do business where you are. In this particular case, it's in Deerfield Beach. Make sure that they're familiar with the city of Deerfield Beach. Make sure they're familiar with all the different inspections that need to be done. It's just that simple.
Okay, Kev, let's go ahead. We're going to talk about driving. We've discussed driving in some of our other videos, so we're just going to touch on this real quick.
Okay, so basically, Florida has a large population of transplants. But most of the folks here are either here transient or semi-transient. They're only here for a couple months out of the year, or they've just recently come down here, or they're just not from around here at all. This is the first time down to Deerfield Beach. And what it does is that it creates and presents some challenges for folks, okay? There are folks that are not necessarily used to sharing the road. There are folks that don't really believe in using turn signals. There are folks that we've seen this that feel that it's quite acceptable to go ahead and make a right turn from the far left-hand lane.
And he's not kidding. It happens all the time.
Okay. Now, traffic season can basically be broken into two areas. It's basically high traffic and higher traffic. Okay.
Well, like seasonal traffic.
Well, seasonal traffic would be the
Right.
higher traffic, okay? So basically, I mean, to the city of Deerfield Beach's credit, they are doing, in conjunction with some of the other areas around here, Pompano Beach is another prime example. They are doing a lot of things to be able to expand the infrastructure, to be able to support it. We've seen a tremendous amount of growth in this area over the past couple of years, and basically we've seen a huge influx of folks coming down, even for short periods of time. And we'll get into more around the number of people that come down here and how frequently they come down and everything else. You'll kind of get the feel for that. Essentially, traffic, I mean, we've said it before, other people have said it, and it is. If you don't like traffic, folks, then this is definitely a strong consideration for you.
Or you may have to plan your day according to the traffic and maybe take some of the back roads instead of the highways. And
Exactly.
those type of things.
Exactly.
Just a tip from a local. Hurricanes. Okay, Kev, let's talk about hurricanes.
Well, folks, here's the thing. As everybody knows it, Florida is prone to hurricane. In fact, we are part of Florida is in what they call Hurricane Alley, depending upon how you look at it. Okay, our hurricane season this is not to be confused. Before we get into the details of hurricanes, this is not to be confused with what we refer to as our daily 20-minute deluge. This is something entirely different. So hurricane season down here starts roughly the beginning of June and runs through the end of November. And what that really means is that that's the time of the year when a lot of the storms kick up in the eastern Atlantic, coming off the coast of, usually off the coast of Africa, maybe a little higher up. Some of these storms can be doozies, folks. Some of these things have come through. Some people maybe remember Andrew coming through back, I think it was 1992 actually, when Andrew came through. Essentially what it is that a hurricane will come through here. Now, where we are here in Deerfield Beach, and actually if you expand it out to the Fort Lauderdale area, okay,
Right,
we're in a unique position both geographically and climate-wise for hurricanes. Now, where we are is essentially where the Atlantic Ocean meets the Gulf of Mexico, meets the Caribbean. So there's three bodies of water that kind of all meet together, okay? Now, the thing about hurricanes is that hurricanes like warm water. The warmer the water, the bigger the storm. So what'll end up happening is that as those hurricanes start coming across the Atlantic, and they may hit Puerto Rico, they may hit Hispaniola, they may hit Cuba, they may come swinging down through the Lesser Antilles, wherever they come through, as soon as they start coming up to close to Florida, and they get a little taste of that warm water, the Florida Strait, which is basically where the Gulf of Mexico is feeding into the Atlantic and the Caribbean, that warm water, they love that warm water. So they'll come shooting through there. So that's the Reader's Digest on kind of hurricanes. So here's the deal with hurricanes. Florida has a great hurricane preparedness, and Deerfield Beach is certainly no exception to that, especially since seeing as how a lot of Deerfield Beach is actually beachfront on the ocean and beachfront in the Intercoastal Waterway. So there's a terrific setup as far as evacuation and what's going on. Plus, our local weather forecasters, they're telling us sometimes as much as a week in advance, hey, next weekend you may get hit with a hurricane. It's looking like it's going to be a force 2 or a force 3, category 3, category 4.
So we're
whatever.
prepared.
So we're prepared, okay? So essentially, but if hurricanes scare you, and it scares a lot of folks, I mean, when I was younger, I lived in Virginia, and a couple of tornadoes came through, and they scared the bejesus out of us. So if you're one of those folks who basically doesn't want to deal with this, or maybe turned off on that, then that's something you want to consider. Now, a little story about our hurricane. When we first moved to South Florida, Suzanne was actually
A knee walker. I just had surgery.
I mean, she just had foot surgery. So, and this was about the time when Hurricane Irma was kind of rearing her little head, kind of telling people what's going on. So, being cautious as we are, we went ahead and got Suzanne out of South Florida, out of the South Florida area, got her out to Dallas, Texas to be with her twin sister. She was very concerned about me, what was going on. This will be the first hurricane she had ever been through. We lived down here. We were only a block off of Federal Highway, which is
right. Well, you had been through it.
Yeah,
I had not.
I had been through. So basically, I was watching for what was going on. The upshot is that she asked me if I was prepared for the hurricane, and I told her yes, I was. And she said, well, what is your hurricane preparedness? And I said, well, I got a couple of Monte Cristo Keystone #2 torpedoes, my favorite Cuban cigar. I've got a bottle of Patron Silver that is basically chilling in the freezer. Okay, and I'm basically ready for I got the chair set up on the patio so that when the hurricane comes through, I can sit out there and I can enjoy my Cuban, sipping my tequila, waiting for the hurricane to come through. And folks, that's exactly what I did.
But he was prepared, and we had the correct windows, etc.
And also, it went to the south and swung around and ended up hitting the Keys and swinging back up into the Gulf of Mexico. And it did do a fair number on the west coast of Florida, on the Gulf Coast of Florida. But basically, this just kind of proves my point, is that we are seeing the frequency of hurricanes hitting the east coast of Florida are becoming less and less frequent. And the inverse is true. The frequency of hurricanes swinging up the Gulf Coast of Florida are becoming more and more prevalent. For some reason, they still seem to be focusing on that area between Galveston and New Orleans, because that's always getting hit. So anyhow, again, the upshot is, folks, if hurricanes are something that you're worried about, or these severe storms are something you're worried about, it's something to take into consideration and really think hard about. The other thing is that, it's just one of those things that kind of scares them, kind of like snakes for some folks. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing, and that's okay.
Okay, guys, we're going to go into reason number 6, and that is the seasonal population.
Okay, so earlier we talked about traffic, and this is one of the things that contributes to the traffic. Okay, now seasonal population. It's no secret that South Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Deerfield Beach, these are all very, very popular tourist spots.
Boca Raton, yeah.
I mean, everywhere, basically from West Palm Beach all the way down to Miami is a very, very popular tourist area. But Deerfield Beach, being where it's uniquely located, where it's just a little bit north of Fort Lauderdale and a little bit south of Boca Raton, basically it's kind of smack in the middle of those two. It is hugely popular from the standpoint of folks coming down here for the season. And what I mean by that is there's a high season, which is basically October through April, and it's a low season, which is basically May through September. That's kind of the way it works out. This becomes a tourist maven coming down here. Folks come down here. At last count, I heard that the Fort Lauderdale area alone in 2022 had over 33 million visitors. Now, they didn't all come here at once.
Right.
Thank goodness. Otherwise, we'd still be stuck in traffic here in March. But in March of 2023, we'd be stuck in traffic. But
currently, as we're filming, and it is high season right now.
It is high season right now. So you will see a lot of folks coming down here. Okay, this causes crowds everywhere. Okay, and again, going into kind of the southern hospitality. A lot of the folks that are coming down here, they're not from the South, okay? So they don't understand, they don't believe in Southern hospitality. There will be larger crowds, there will be longer wait times, there will be more traffic, okay? And there's bound to be a little bit more friction, because you're trying to fit a lot more people and a lot more cars into the same size area, and basically it becomes kind of a tight fit. So.
Right, but there's a tip. You can go, if you've got to run errands, take the back roads, which I had mentioned before, or if you're going out to dinner or something, either make reservations or go earlier or later.
And the other thing too is that there are things, if you're a resident down here or you want to become a resident down here, then plan for the things that you need to do, your doctor visits, getting your car tuned up, and all those kind of things. Plan for that during the off season. Okay, it'll be a whole lot easier to get things taken care of. You'll find a lot less traffic and a lot less congestion, and a lot less crowd if you go ahead and plan that way. So anyhow, if crowds are not your thing, it's something you want to consider, that you want to think about coming down to Deerfield Beach, because during the high season, it does get crowded.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about property taxes.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the property taxes, and we're going to talk about the higher cost of living down in Deerfield Beach overall. Okay, now property taxes are certainly a big component. It is more expensive to live in paradise. Okay, everything comes with a price, and living in paradise comes with a little bit higher price.
I mean, look around. Why wouldn't you?
I mean, yeah, exactly. So, but one of the most easily recognizable example is property tax. Now, in Deerfield Beach, the way that property tax is assessed, if you will, is that it's roughly 1.08 or 1.9% of the assessed fair market value. Now that's the assessed value from the taxation authority. That's basically the assessed value. And Deerfield Beach is a little bit higher. In neighboring Pompano Beach, okay, it's 1.06% of the assessed fair market value. In Miami, it can go down as low as 1.02%. So it is a little bit more expensive to live here in Deerfield Beach from a property tax perspective. Now, the cost of living in Deerfield Beach generally, okay, is about 9 to 12% higher than the national average, okay? And why is that? Okay, well, number one is property taxes. Number two, okay, is basically the cost of basically getting around here and doing things. A lot of Deerfield Beach is on the beach.
However, you forgot to mention we don't have state income tax.
I was getting ready to mention that, sweetheart, but thank you for bringing that up. So one of the offsets to it, just to kind of follow up on Suzanne's comment, one of the offsets is that make it a little bit less expensive, okay, is that Florida is not one of those states that charges that assesses a state income tax. So your paycheck will go a little further down here, your retirement will go a little further down here, but being down here is costly. It's a little bit more. It's more expensive. You have more frequent maintenance on things, especially the closer you get to bodies of water. You have higher costs of things, especially like gas, from the standpoint of gas taxes. You have higher grocery costs down here. Now, for some reason, and I haven't figured this one out yet, other than just basically the sheer volume of healthcare facilities down here, healthcare costs are actually lower than a national average, which is terrific. And there are some wonderful, wonderful hospitals and healthcare facilities down here for basically folks of all ages.
That's true, but that's another video.
That's another video, exactly. So,
right.
But essentially, it does cost a little bit more. Again, it's 9 to 12% higher than a national average to live down here in Deerfield Beach. It is 9 to 12% higher than a national average to live in Deerfield Beach.
Okay, guys, we're going to talk briefly about the political environment.
Okay, actually, the political climate down here is what is probably a little bit more accurate way of doing
Okay.
it. Okay. So anyhow, okay, and without going into who's right, who's wrong, who's right, who's left, who's better, who's worse. Okay, folks, here's the deal. Okay, when you come down to Florida's political climate has been shifting as a whole. Okay, there are folks where we've had folks come out and tell us that basically whenever they drive up and down the road, they see people with signs out there, pro this, go that, he's great, and they're so and so sucks, all this kind of stuff. We see that. We're not going to get into that. The point I'm trying to make is that when you come down to Deerfield Beach or the Fort Lauderdale area in general, you will more than likely be, I don't want to use the term confronted, but you will be approached in regards to what your political beliefs are. Okay, and there are folks down here, much like there are everywhere else, folks down here who are very, very strong and very, very definitive in their beliefs. Okay, and if your beliefs and their beliefs don't exactly sync up, okay, that can be cause for a little bit of consternation. It can be cause for a little bit of conflict. Okay, I'm not saying who's right, who's wrong. I'm not saying who's better, who's worse. That's completely irrelevant.
That's a personal choice.
Right, it's completely irrelevant from our perspective. Okay, but I'm telling you that if you have strong political beliefs one way or the other, okay, be aware that somebody may not agree with yours, and you may have a little bit of conversation that ensues. We've seen it, and it happens. It's one of those things that just happens. Okay, it's a fact of life. However, it's also a fact of life pretty much anywhere else we go. So it's just the way it is. But again, you are entitled to your own beliefs.
To each his own. Right.
Exactly.
Now, reason number 9 is we're going to talk about limited cultural activities.
Okay, so folks, Deerfield Beach, it's a small town. Okay, and it's not like Boca, and it's not like Miami, and it's not like Fort Lauderdale. So whereas those towns are known for their cultural and their advancement of the arts and all the kind of culture museums, okay, Deerfield Beach, they're not quite as well known for their arts and for their entertainment and for their cultural area. They're really more well known for the beach. Now, that's not to say that there's not things there, but most of the museums are more local museums that talk about the local history. The culture is more from the standpoint of going and checking out one of the clubs and seeing what band's playing that Friday evening or that Saturday evening, or who's playing, but there's just not a whole lot of culture. Now, the beauty of this is, again, we've talked about this before. Where Deerfield Beach is located, you're a few miles from Boca, which is basically, to many folks, that's the center of culture and arts and entertainment here in South Florida. You're very, very close to Fort Lauderdale, which has all kinds of museums and all kinds of great things that are going on there. Playhouses. I mean, Hamilton's been running at the Fort Lauderdale, at the Broward County Playhouse for over a year.
And you're not far from Miami. How far would you say?
And exactly, you're about 38 to 40 miles from Miami, so depending upon traffic, let's call it 45 minutes to an hour and 45 minutes.
Right,
Okay,
so you're very close.
So you're close to it, but if you're looking for those types of things right outside the door, folks, you're going to be disappointed. That's no other way to put it. There's not a whole lot of that high-end culture.
It's a short drive.
But it's a short drive, it's a short trip. I mean, in some cases, heck, Boca and Lauderdale are basically Uber rides from here for a couple of bucks.
Yeah, so, right.
Okay.
So it's just not in your back door, but it's very close.
Right.
Okay, guys, let's talk about the next reason, which is public transportation. It's limited.
Or lack thereof, actually. Okay. Now, folks, this is one of my pet peeves too, because basically when I go out for a weekend, when I go on a Saturday to go to the beach, okay, I basically want to park my car somewhere. I want to be able to go out. I want to relax, go have a nice meal, maybe have an adult beverage or 2 or 3. I'm always looking for like an Uber ride, or I'm looking for one of those little golf carts that will seat 10 people. That's electric. That'll take me to the beach and take me to the restaurant, to the Whale's Rib, or take me to one of the places that we like to go to. That, to me, is probably one of the most significant disappointments for Deerfield Beach, is that there's not a whole lot of them. If you look at Deerfield Beach as compared to some of the other areas like Pompano Beach, Lauderdale by the Sea, Fort Lauderdale's got a plethora of public transportation, but even those little smaller areas, such as Lauderdale by the Sea, they have all kinds of folks running around driving golf carts and have little buses and shuttle buses that take you here and there.
And it's a free service that's provided.
Exactly.
You just tip them.
It's a free service, and in many cases, it's actually, if you factor in the cost of, parking your car further out, which is a lot cheaper, and then doing that, you still come out ahead. Okay, but again, the lack of significant amount of public transportation, that's a pet peeve for me as far as Deerfield Beach. But that all being said, we still come here.
You still have your own car if you want.
Exactly. Deerfield Beach is a beautiful coastal town, and it may be an ideal location for some, but you need to weigh the positives and the negatives before you make your decision. So ultimately, the decision to move to Deerfield Beach is certainly on you, but we would suggest that you look at your family situation, you look at and weigh out what the positives are and the negatives are before going ahead and making a choice.
Oh, and if you got any use out of this video, or you appreciate it, we'd really like it if you'd give us a like and go ahead and share.
If you consider subscribing to our channel, that would be terrific, so we can share the videos out to other folks and they can get the benefit out of the video that hopefully you all did.